A study by Consumer Credit Reporting Agency reveals Filipinos have become more financially aware of this health crisis, cutting back on non-essential expenses. Majority of the respondents also believe access to credit and lending products is crucial in achieving their financial goals. TransUnion Philippines CEO and President P. Arellano joins us for more on our kababayan's spending habits. Thank you so much for joining us, Pia. So tell us, why did our kababayans cut back on non-essential expenses?
Right. So maybe just a brief background, Rico, right, before I share some key insights. So TransUnion conducts this consumer pulse survey every quarter to essentially try to understand how the pandemic has impacted the finances of Filipinos. And though it doesn't really delve so much into consumer spending habits and patterns, some interesting takeaways from the last survey were that 59%, and this is a decreasing trend, 59% or fewer Filipino households' incomes have been negatively impacted by COVID. So we see this improving quarter over quarter. 52% of Filipinos also said that they will be cutting back on discretionary spending as a result of this. And another positive insight that we saw from the survey was that more Filipinos are actually saving. So 47% of Filipinos rather have actually opened up an emergency fund and are putting money in for the rainy day given the pandemic. So, positive habits that are really spurring from the pandemic.
So, I mean, just trying to break down the numbers, no, I want to take a look at 52% of our kababayans cutting discretionary spending. In which areas are these?
Discretionary spending would basically cover dining, entertainment, subscriptions, right? So, perhaps non-essentials, if you will. And then we saw, if you look deeper into the segments, it's really more the Gen Xers and the baby boomers who will be cutting down on this discretionary spend, which is very interesting because those least impacted in terms of income are likewise the baby boomers and your Gen Xers.
And 47% of our kababayans now want to save. Is it also because many of them lost their jobs or were forced to take leaves as businesses became weak or even closed down during this pandemic?
We can surmise, we'd like to surmise that it's really a result of just reducing discretionary spend and choosing to allocate it in a savings fund or an emergency fund. So we'd like to surmise that it's really a result of that.
And of course, there are also trends in terms of credit and lending products in achieving their goals. Why did we see our kababayans want to borrow on various kinds of lending products in basically trying to reach their goals in terms of maybe lives or maybe aspirational things?
Yes, correct. So again, credit is not a bad thing. Credit actually opens doors to opportunities, allows people to upgrade their lifestyle, open up businesses, etc. Right? So the survey did reveal that 52% of Filipinos really deem credit to be very important in terms of achieving their financial goals. The sad thing though, Rico, is only 35% said that they actually had access to credit and to lending. So there's a bit of a disparity there in terms of demand and supply, if you think of it.
So how did our kababayans borrow then? Was it through formal lending or through informal borrowing?
Right, that's a good question. As a result of this access, right, lack of access, right, only 35% felt that they had sufficient access to credit. A lot of Filipinos have resorted to informal channels, whether it be family and friends or the black market or other informal channels. So it's not really a preference for informal. It's really more a function of lack of access.
Because I was talking to several banks several months ago, and they would always tell me that there's also a process to borrow from the bank. You really have to have a credit history.
There is.
You have to have, of course, collateral to be able to borrow from the bank. So that is one of the restrictions to access to funding from banks. But of course, you have your credit card lending. But of course, the interest rate is quite high compared to borrowing from a bank.
Right. But I do want to debunk that myth, right? Because again, their access to credit doesn't have to come with collateral. In fact, the most pervasive loan type in the Philippines is your personal loan. right? So, and again, given the proliferation of fintechs, the game has really changed. So fintechs are now lending to the unbanked and new to credit, and there are different solutions that can actually be ascribed to. So from alternative scoring, coupled with our bureau traditional payment credit data, all of that coupled together and bundled with sophisticated analytics, it really helps to accelerate financial inclusion.
Well, you mentioned about fintech. So what do they think about scams and frauds, especially in the digital space, which has increased by leaps and bounds since the pandemic started?
Absolutely. So again, I always say this, an unintended consequence of digitization is digital fraud. Half of the respondents in our survey were actually victimized or were hit by some sort of fraud attempt in the last 3 months. And that's a huge statistic. That's a huge number, right? So I guess it really takes a village. It takes a community. We have to constantly reinforce the need to be aware, to be vigilant, right? For consumers, it's still very basic. Do not share your passwords, your PIN codes, your activation codes. Change your passwords regularly, and do not click on any links that may seem suspicious. For businesses and lenders, there are also ways to combat fraud more proactively. TransUnion, we actually have a solution called True Validate, which is a multi-layered suite of fraud checks, right? Which allows for a friction-right customer experience and really guards and combats against fraud because it has sophisticated, ID and document verification. We can detect suspicious devices, fake emails, and blacklisted phone numbers. And finally, also check against negative blacklists, both globally and locally.
We should
So there are
definitely
ways to
have
be
you back
proactive
for your next quarterly report and see what are the consumer habits of our kababayans in the next quarter. Thank you so much for this insights. Arellano, the CEO and President of TransUnion.